Outlaw Law is brought to you by Whitaker and Hamer, attorneys and counselors at law. Your law firm for life.
Welcome back into the Outlaw Lawyers. Josh Whitaker and Joe Hamer, managing partners, Whitaker and Hamer Law Firm. They are your hosts. Also joining us in studio today, Cassandra Nicholas and Taylor Scruggs-Smith, also attorney at Whitaker and Hamer. Offices located Raleigh, Garner, Clayton, Goldsboro, Fuquay Varina, Gastonia, Morehead City, The Moon. I mean, they're everywhere. I'm Morgan Patrick, consumer advocate. We get into the legalese topics. You may have a situation that you're facing. You may have questions. I've got a phone number for you. Get in touch with Whitaker and Hamer. Call 800-659-1186. That's 800-659-1186. Leave your contact info, briefly what the call is about. An attorney with Whitaker and Hamer will be in touch. And as always, you can email the show, questions@theoutlawlawyer.com, and we will answer those questions on a future broadcast. Where are we going? We're going to go to the life hack list that was sent to you, Josh, or you found?
This was sent to me. So
Okay.
people will talk to me during the week, and a lot of times that's what I talk about on the show, just questions I get asked during the week, things that come up in conversation. But somebody sent me this list, and I took a look at it, and again, not a great list for content, but I think a great list for discussion. So we got this list again is entitled 11 situations where you need a lawyer and 3 where you don't. Before we jump into this, I did want to mention, you may be listening to us on the radio. We're on a lot of radio stations throughout North Carolina. You may be listening to us as a podcast. So we do deliver the show as both a radio show every week and as a podcast. Our show was nominated for I hope I get this right, 2022 People's Choice Podcast Award for Best News Podcast.
In the world.
Right.
Now, is that movie news or is that legal news? What is that?
I don't remember. News in
Just
general.
news.
But
it's funny because I think it also encompassed politics, which we
stay away from.
Politics
we
and
make a
news
point
category.
and not be political. So
I don't
we
know.
fold those-
Joe,
we
you
still
weren't
make
with
it
us last week. I mean, last week we talked about the legal ads that were bashing attorneys, and you guys had a great conversation about that. So we kind of
Oh, yeah, I seen that.
I've gotten four
went-
flyers in the mail this week, bashing Wiley Nickel. But
I've seen all the ads about.
Did you stab
things
your
legal.
landlord in the face? Wiley Nickel.
Those get me. But
I thought that was his real ad, man. And I was like, man, this guy.
so I was happy when I got the news that we were nominated as a podcast. We really enjoy doing the show. We get a lot out of it on our end. Hopefully, it's helpful to the folks who listen. We hear from a lot of folks that listen, and so that has been very rewarding for us. But it was nice to get nominated for the People's Choice Podcast. The one thing that stood out to me, I hope we win this prestigious award. That'd be very nice. We'll tell you about it. I think the award show is the end of this month. I think it's 9:30.
Are we going to have the awkward cutaways when they
September.
announce the award and we're sitting there and we're waiting to win? And
Yeah,
then,
we're going to be there in person, man.
And then
Josh is wearing a sleeveless tank top. He's going to get a tattoo.
I'm gonna
if we
go-
win this, you get it tatted on your chest, Josh.
I'm going to go
That's
naked
award.
unless I get an Outlaw Lawyer hoodie.
Yeah.
All right, we got to make
We're
that
definitely winning.
We got to make that an urgent
Put us in
matter.
another category.
I am not as happy as I am to be nominated, as much as I hope that we win. One of the other nominees in the category, Cassandra, who's the dark horse candidate for that one?
it is The Problem with Jon Stewart.
That's right.
So,
So Jon Stewart of Daily Show fame has a very good podcast. I had never listened to it until we got nominated. I listened to a couple of episodes yesterday. Very good podcast, as you would expect from someone as accomplished as Jon Stewart. But again,
It's all right. Basically a copycat
Yeah.
of
That's
your
right.
show, essentially.
He's a hack.
yeah. So we're up against some pretty big competition.
but
again,
1 of 10 with Jon Stewart. I'm pleased.
That's
It's
right.
It's a
fine.
nice neighborhood.
So anyway, that's something we'll be looking at. We don't expect to take home the trophy there, but we'll certainly update everybody.
But if anyone wants to watch, it's going to be streamed live on podcastawards.com at 9 p.m. on September 30th.
Yep. So we'll let you know how that goes. But anyway, back to our list. All right. So we've got this list, 11 situations where you need a lawyer, 3 where you don't. Hopefully we'll make our way through the whole list. The first situation where you need a lawyer on this list is a complex or nasty divorce. That's the terminology they used. Attorneys wouldn't really use that terminology. Attorneys would just probably just say divorce. But that's a good point, right? So You got a divorce happening where maybe, when you're getting divorced, people usually aren't getting along very well, right? And that's how we get there, right? Sometimes there's some financial stress involved. There's some kids. There's some assets. Taylor, you'd probably agree that's probably a situation where the average person would probably want to consult with an attorney.
Yes, definitely agree. So when I was actually reading the article, I kind of had to chuckle to myself a couple times because, they made the comment about, if you guys agree, there's no real need for an attorney, which of course I would disagree with because we've had
you
consults.
haven't encountered one where an attorney is not necessary?
Not yet. Even when people agree, they write out their own agreements, which under North Carolina law most of the time isn't effective or valid or legal. So it's like, please just get the attorney so you know that your agreement on these assets is binding and not just, worth the paper you wrote it on.
I was trying to think of a divorce situation where an attorney might not need to get involved. And so the situation in my head was, two people married, but they each had homes, right, in their sole name. They each had their bank accounts separate and they didn't have kids. And they just decided they didn't want to be married anymore. Just like a handshake, absolute
It's like
divorce.
two homeless people.
Yeah, just, we don't really have any kids. We don't have any assets. Basically, there's nothing to litigate over. There's nothing, there's no, and then that's probably a divorce where maybe an attorney doesn't have to get involved. Maybe.
But even
also,
then, man,
even then,
it's going to be annoying having to go to court, having to do the pleading. Like
most people don't draft the pleadings right, so they end up in court longer
exactly.
because they don't know the court process for how to get divorced. So like they have to try to get the divorce 3 different times, which could take a year just trying to get that done correctly. But even in a situation where, two people have houses of their own in their own name, if you bought those during the marriage, somebody might still want a deed saying, you're giving up your rights in this or.
Yeah. And even if not, you've got to deal with the appreciation in value since the time that you've gotten married.
Exactly. So. And then there's always the thing people forget about of retirement accounts. Most people don't think about that till right when they file and then they want to argue about the retirement accounts.
Yeah. And there's that period too, in North Carolina, we're one of the states that you have to be separated for a year before
and
you
a
can,
day.
Year and a day.
Year and a day. And a day.
before you can file for a divorce. And so a lot of times to survive, just to do normal things as an individual, a separation agreement or a free trader agreement, you're going to need something like if you're going to go buy your next house, you really want to make sure you've handled everything that you can handle. So during that separation period, you're operating as a not single person, but you're operating as independently of your spouse as you can operate. And there's a lot of fine print things that you need to be aware of, and the folks who pull a form online and try their best to write it out.
Please don't use online forms. Some of those have said under the laws of Ohio, and you're clearly in North Carolina.
Yeah, North Carolina, every state.
Ohio's got some good laws, though.
Every state has
their
different ways of tackling issues, and you're in Iowa, your separation agreement in Iowa that quotes Iowa statutes may not transfer to North Carolina very well for things like real property and custody and things like that. So it's very easy. I guess there is a divorce out there that could be simple enough where you don't mess it up or you don't prejudice yourself somehow. But most divorces, most separations require an attorney, and we're all attorneys. So I guess I try to, when I'm giving people advice, I try to tell them things like, okay, you could probably do this on your own. You don't have to hire me. I could make it a lot easier for you, but you could probably get through blank, right? And so I always try to be very honest with people because I don't want them to think that I automatically advise them to get an attorney, even if they don't, just because I'm an attorney, right?
And we definitely don't do that in terms of family law. But the thing is, even if you're filing a divorce by yourself, the clerks can't answer questions or give you legal advice. So the court itself can't answer any of your questions if you don't understand the paperwork. They can only give you the paperwork to fill out. So if you're not sure about what you're doing, that's not really helpful.
All right, we got a lot of things to get through in this list. That's number one. Situations where you may need an attorney, a complex or nasty divorce. We're gonna update that to say probably any divorce, an attorney.
All divorces, but especially the nasty ones.
That's right. and then two, you're probably gonna want 2 attorneys, right? Each party is gonna want their own attorney. Most attorneys are unable. There's some ethics rules about what they can do for both spouses, and so it's not like you guys are both going to go in and talk to the same attorney. So some attorneys are probably going to have to get involved in that situation. But that's going to take us to number 2, which is not a big issue nationwide. This might be a big topic. In North Carolina, it's not. Well, at least part of it. So the first part of the situation, they're saying you may need a lawyer for a wrongful termination or discrimination in the workplace. And so discrimination in the workplace is obviously a nationwide problem that would require an attorney's involvement. Wrongful termination, we're a at-will state. So wrongful terminations, that's a tough one to prove in North Carolina. Discrimination in the workplace, those are federal laws, right? So if you're suffering discrimination in the workplace, there are federal laws that apply to that. You definitely might have, you would want to, I can't imagine anybody doing anything in these situations on their own. I would think there's going to be litigation here, right? You're going to have to get an attorney involved, I would think.
Yeah, that seems like a good idea. I've only had
I think to clarify that point, you don't have to get an attorney involved, but I think your chances of success are basically zero without getting an attorney involved. I think that's the better way to put it.
Absolutely. I've only had one consult regarding this at all. A lot more of the time, if I'm having any consults regarding employment, it's about like an employment contract,
That's right.
non-compete stuff.
And that's a good thing to say here. So if you're an at-will employee, that means there's no contract between you and your lender. You're not a 1099 contractor. Your employer's just hired you to work in their store or their office, and they can fire you for any reason or no reason. They can't fire you for an illegal reason, right? So it can't be anything illegal, but that is definitely different. If you have an employment contract and you get terminated, that's a breach of contract issue. That's not a wrongful termination, at least not in the way that attorneys think about it, but that's number 2 on our list. And again, we don't see a whole lot of this, but general advice is you're going to want to consult with an attorney if something like that happens. You can tell a non-attorney wrote this list. But number 3 on this is lawsuits, right?
Lawsuits.
Just in general.
What do you need a lawyer for that for?
So in this example from this person who wrote this list, lawsuit is someone sued you, right? For something, I'm guessing that what they meant was like a contractual issue, like we just kind of mentioned breach of contract, but somebody is suing you for money, right? You did something wrong, you breached a contract, and yes, I would say a consultation with an attorney on once you've been sued is important.
However, I want to jump ahead a little bit to the last part of this list, the 3 instances where this person says you do not need an attorney, and it has small claims court. So you can be sued, but the amount in North Carolina is under $10,000, and it's in small claims court. I think you can do that on your own, but so number 3, that you need an attorney for a lawsuit when you're being sued is kind of mixed messages with the other part of the list.
And number 3, I think we're going to have to break down number 3, and we're up against a break, so I think we're going to break down lawsuits next, Morgan.
Okay, sounds good. Again, we're going over 11 situations, if we can get to them all, where you need a lawyer, and we also have a few that you may not need a lawyer. But remember, we're not quite sure who put this list together, so we've got attorneys on the case, and we'll talk about, again, lawsuits coming up on the other side, but also DUI, drug charges, car accident with injury, criminal charges. Those are just a few of the topics coming up on the other side. You're listening to the Outlaw Lawyers. Josh Whitaker and Joe Hamer are your hosts. They're the managing partners at Whitaker and Hamer Law Firm. Offices in Raleigh, Garner, Clayton, Goldsboro, Fuquay Varina, Gastonia, and now in Morehead City. And in studio today with us, more attorneys, Cassandra Nicholas and Taylor Scruggs-Smith, also with Whitaker and Hamer Law Firm. If you've got a legal question you are facing and you have questions and you need some answers, well, you can call this number, 800-659-1186. That's 800-659-1186. And again, leave your contact info, briefly what that call's about, and an attorney with Whitaker and Hamer will be in touch. And again, email your questions to the show. We'll answer them on future broadcasts. Questions at theoutlawlawyer.com. We're back right after this.